Hello, fellow nerds, and welcome to Nerd Doom, where the table explodes with nerd culture, anime, video gaming, and more. Welcome to today's podcast. We have a special guest with us today. We have Hannah from Hannahmation Studios. Say hello.
Hey.
And of course, I'm Addy. Thanks for joining us today. So it's going to be a girls' talk, sort of. And it's not going to be like, oh my god, hee bushy stuff. It's literally going to be like, did you read? And when I say read, we're going to be talking about fan fictions. Because fan fictions, anyone ever hears it, just kind of goes, yeah, and cringes. Or at least that's what I see a lot of people do. That or they just kind of go, what fanfics, and hide their phone and computer. So, if no one probably knows, but I'm an avid fanfic reader. Are you an avid fanfic reader?
I am. I do enjoy fan fiction.
Do you have a genre or a fandom that you prefer to read?
I really enjoy adventure and time travel. I think those are some really interesting categories.
Those are really good ones. I like those. What about fandom?
Well, anything in the BioWare fandom is really cool. I enjoy that a lot.
What? No Witcher?
Well, some Witcher a little bit.
But mostly Bioframe?
Mostly BioWare. It's a lot more consistent across, the canon that's used in the stories.
That's fair. Do you like to go after the dirty stuff, or do you like to kind of stick with stuff that's...
I prefer anything. I like a plot. So if it's a plot and it happens to have dirty things in it, cool. If it's a plot and it doesn't have dirty things in it, sure thing. Awesome. Like, as long as the story sounds good, doesn't matter the rating.
Yeah, I kind of feel that way too. My stuff usually end up going for mostly Danny Phantom fanfics. There's been a smattering of Fullmetal Alchemist, Yu-Gi-Oh, and there's like a few other small ones that there's like one or two fanfics I've read because everything else was garbage.
Well, what about Teen Wolf? Do you read a lot of Teen Wolf fan fiction? Not really?
No, there's not really a lot of good ones in that one. Mostly because a lot of times they're like, we're going to pair these two random characters because it seemed like they were a couple in the show. I'm like, no, they really weren't.
Bad chemistry?
In my opinion, it is. Like, I can see why they would think that, but me personally, I'm like, I don't see that, so I'm not going to read it.
That's fair. Everybody has an OTP and an OTP, as they say.
I hate OC characters.
Oh, you do?
Yes, in a story. Like, somebody throws in there, like, if it's like a side character that's like that follows along with the story, fine, but not like the OC is the main character, because that annoys me to no end.
Okay. So you haven't found a lot of fics that have like a well-developed original character as the protagonist?
No.
Do you think that's a fault specifically of the Danny Phantom fandom, or do you think it's something that spreads across different fandoms that you've been a part of?
Different fandoms.
Okay.
The Danny Phantom ones, usually you don't see a lot of OC ones nowadays, but like early on, like early 2000s, you saw a lot of OCs that were in there, and these were like 14 and 15-year-old girls, even 12-year-olds, inserting their characters in poorly written stories. So they're going to be cringeworthy no matter what. So,
do you think that OC culture has sort of fallen out of favor recently? Do you think that it's something that was more prevalent because it was more accepted earlier? Or do you think that it's just changing tastes in the fandoms? What do you think?
A little bit of both. Because nowadays I'm seeing if it's an OC, they're actually creating original content within that universe, and usually they don't turn into a fanfic. They usually end up making it into a fan comic of their own choosing. Those are pretty decent. I've seen a few good ones of those, and then what else? The other ones, I don't know if it's died out or what's happened with it, but I personally don't see it as often. But then again, I'm also excluding it from my searches, so I don't see it. So I think I can't really say for sure nowadays. Because I used to be like an avid fanfic.net reader, because that was the place to go. I understood the platform, I understood how to find stuff. But as I've gotten older, like a lot of things people don't really update on there. And I've discovered that apparently Archive of Our Own is like the top place to go for like good stories.
That's what I've heard, yeah. But comparatively, between the format of... So you started on fanfiction.net. Do you still like the format of fanfiction.net more than the format of Archive of Our Own now that you've started to read more on the archive?
There are certain aspects that I like more from fanfic, and then there are aspects that I'm really starting to enjoy from archive. The problem with archive is you can add on a lot of tags, and that can muddle up your search, and it becomes really hard to find what you're looking for because everything kind of gets mixed in. So when you put in very specific things, you're probably not going to find a certain story because the tags are just like everything under the sun. And they can be like the standard tags of like this pairing or this type of genre, or it's like a random like conversation that the person has put into these tags. And you're like, why?
So will you skip a fic that has rambling long tags even if the premise seems good?
I won't skip the fic itself. It's just it takes forever to scroll to get to the summary of what the story is about. I have a tendency to skip over stories that if the title is not capitalized correctly, like there's supposed to be a capitalization like beginning, usually that means they're not using proper grammar or capitalization throughout the entire story. Okay. And I tried and I checked one. I checked a few of them where like the title wasn't capitalized, and I figured, oh, maybe they just error and they just posted it and they're like, ah, whatever. Oh no, it's no capitalization, no spacing, run-on sentence, it's terrible grammar. And I'm just like, I can't read this. Like, you had an interesting concept, but I can't read this.
Right. I've heard people call that lapse lock. They say it's a stylistic choice, but I don't understand. Like, doesn't it feel like it would become so homogenous? Like all of the text just runs together if you don't have anything separating it.
It's a technique that I've seen. I've even heard about in English classes. Like if you're writing, and even authors are like, yeah, if you want to use this, like if you've got ideas and you just want to get them out and you don't want to worry about grammar or those stuff, just do it. Because then you can go back later, look it over, and then start organizing it, start putting in the proper grammar and the proper capitalizations and all that fun stuff that goes along with the English language and making a proper, paper or story or whatever. But seeing it in fanfic format, off-putting to me.
So, clicking into a fan fiction, is the lack of capitalization something that would make you click off immediately?
Yes.
The run-on paragraphs where they don't separate out when one person is speaking from another person speaking? What is like the be-all, end-all thing that will make you absolutely drop a fan fiction?
Like if I've been reading it or like I'm just searching?
No, if you're just looking for something to try, like a new fan fiction. I
will just scroll past. If the title is there's no capitalization, not even in the summary there's any capitalization, I'm just like, don't care.
Okay.
I'll go straight past it. What about you? Like what part of your fanfic scrolling through you look at and you go, oh hell no.
If it's one big block of text, if I open it up, because sometimes, the no capitalization in the title can be like, I think that's something that younger writers these days do for sort of an aesthetic choice. So like, sure, maybe you did that just in your title and maybe the rest of your fic is better. But no, if you open the fic and it's just one big block of text, I do not have the brain capacity to read that.
Too many letters all at once.
Exactly.
Yeah, no, that one throws me off. I'm like, there's something supposed to be here, but I can't. One of the things that really gets me is I find like the title looks good, the description or the summary looks decent, and it's interesting, it's got a good concept. I'm like, okay, hang on, let me see how this is written. I click on it, and instead of like the quotations for like if somebody's speaking, it's dash, they're talking, giant space, dash, someone else is talking, dash, someone else is talking, dash, action, and I'm just like, literally like a dash instead of quotations. And I'm just like, what? Am I reading a PowerPoint or am I reading a story?
Like a script format.
Oh, yeah. And I can get that. But the way they described it doesn't make it sound like it's supposed to be like that. And I'm just like, oh, no.
Okay, I got you. Well, on the flip side, what's something that draws you to a fic immediately as soon as you see the title or the tags or when you click into it?
Really, really picky.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. I find myself drawn to hurt comfort fanfics. I didn't actually say what genres I like. With Danny Phantom, I like this slightly angsty stuff with hurt comfort. Where like something happens to the main character, and whether it's like not necessarily character death, I can't stand that stuff. I'm like, why would you kill off the main character? But something happens to the character, and then if it's like romance is tossed in there, then it's something that creates the couple to come together. Or with Danny Phantom in particular, I really like the thought process of what if one of his parents find out about him.
Okay.
So I really enjoy that, and if it's well written, well done, makes sense. It doesn't have to be necessarily canon or canonically, but it makes sense.
Okay. So do you prefer things that are more in tune with canon, or do you prefer deviations from canon?
If it deviates from canon, it has to make sense.
Okay.
Like I kind of briefly told you earlier about one story I found just yesterday called Something's Wrong with Danny Phantom, or Danny Fenton by Let me give this author some credit because it was actually really good.
We are dropping some recs here on Nerd Doom.
Oh yeah, it was on Archive of Our Own. It's Something's Wrong with Danny Fenton by perfectly underscore inconspicuous. I don't know how to pronounce that last part.
Okay.
Here, I'll show you.
Let me get my blankie here.
Mm-hmm.
Perfectly inconspicuous.
Yes, okay, I said it right.
Okay.
So that's the author on Archive of Our Own. It's 6 chapters long, and it's really good because it's an alternate universe, which again, if it's alternate universe or deviates from the canon, make it make sense.
Okay, that makes sense.
Because I don't know if you've ever come across AU fanfics.
Yeah, I know of them. I know that they exist. Yes.
Have you read one? At least for like your fandoms?
Not really. I usually like things that are more in tune with the canon because I've become familiarized with the canon and I like to read things that I'm familiar with.
That's fair.
AUs take more time to get settled into, but I can appreciate a good AU.
The AUs that I always read, usually, again, because Danny fans like they're usually my go-to fanfic reading because a lot of times they find good ones because they can take this super cartoony, like, haha, it's for teen, like early teens, preteens, and mix in with real world stuff and they can make it make sense.
Okay.
And alternate universe ones I usually read is Sam and Tucker are best friends. Like they've been friends the entire time and they end up befriending Danny.
Okay.
For whatever reason. I like that because usually you can play that off as Danny's been there, but no one's ever really talked to him because he's like the weird ghost hunter's kid. And
okay.
And something like that. So I'm like, okay, I can do that. Canonically, it has to be like, it picks up between a certain point and then continues on into an original story.
Okay.
But still mix everything in. And everyone, what cracks me up, and I don't know if they do this in your fandom, canonically, Danny Phantom's last episode was called Phantom Planet. And at the end, there was this huge reveal, and then the entire world finds out who Danny is. He's Phantom. Surprise. Everybody in the fandom hates it.
Oh.
They hate that episode so much because it was very rushed. And also they felt like, why would he do that? Because like you have this character who's the entire time that the show's been running is been reluctant and terrified to tell anyone who he is, including his parents. And all of a sudden he's just like, I'm okay with revealing who I am in the middle of this giant field of ice and cameras around me.
Okay.
What?
Yeah. That seems weird.
So everybody kind of like, if they're writing a story that takes place after a certain episode or involves a certain episode, they're like, Phantom Planet doesn't exist.
Okay. That makes sense. So when you're looking for or reading Danny Phantom, fandom.
Yeah. It's tongue twisting. It's okay.
Do you prefer stories that are more in tune with the original tone, like more cartoony, or do you like things that are sort of heavier and darker?
Heavier and darker.
Oh, yeah?
When I was younger, I liked kind of like, I think it's my fanfic preference that changed as I've gotten older. Like when I was in school, I liked things that kind of like I could relate to school-wise and everything. But as I've gotten older, I like things that are a little bit more darker, which is the one I was reading yesterday that I just mentioned. It's got a more spooky, darker feel to it, which is nice. And when I was in school, it was more like the buddy friendship, like slightly teenage angst style stories.
Okay.
What about yours? Like, you said BioWare.
Yeah.
Okay.
Dragon Age and Mass Effect mostly. I haven't played Jade Empire. I'm horrible, but that's okay.
It's okay. We all have that one video game. We're like, oh, I got this new video game. Goes back to play the other one for the 50th time.
Yeah, pretty much.
But like, which one out of those two do you prefer reading?
I'm not a big fan of fluff or things that take something dark and make it fluffy. I like the original tone of the games because they are pretty dark, pretty mature. They are mature rated games. But I don't know. I think it's odd that, I can understand if life is hard as it is and you say, well, I don't really want that in this fandom that's giving me comfort, so I'm going to create something that's lighthearted and happy, something that I can get lost in so that I don't have to think about the hardships of the world. I respect that. I don't personally like it because I don't find that it has as much meat to the stories as things that are allowed to be darker. But I don't know. That's usually what I find in AUs in my fandoms is they're very soft.
Yeah, I can see that. There's 2 stories from the Danny Phantom fan fiction. See, even I tongue-tied myself. That were written by the same author, but they're like completely 2 different storylines. One is almost canonically, but there's a little plot twist that they've added in there that like you're like, oh, yeah, I can see that happening. And then the other one is semi-alternate universe where like it's again where it's either Sam and Tucker are friends or Danny and Tucker have been friends a long time and they meet one of the other characters and then become friends then. But one of them is an accident happened between Danny and Sam when they were younger, and they have a semi-psychic link, but it's not necessarily like they're psychic. It's just they have this connection because of a weird scientific experiment that their parents were doing that they messed with, and the accident happened. And as they got older, like the connection kind of like died out because they kind of suppressed it so much, and then all of a sudden it's kind of rearing its head back. So they're dealing with everyday school stuff, and then dealing with this connection returning. And then the other one is Danny and Tucker have been friends, and Sam goes to the school because she's goth. Everyone thinks she's a weirdo and everything, and then they end up befriending each other, and then Sam eventually finds out that Danny is Phantom. It's really well written, so I kind of liked that semi-fluff, but friendship budding.
Okay.
I like that.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yes. And it's not necessarily like it's romantic, but there's like hints of it in there, like they kind of get together, because they kind of play that out in a lot of those fanfics for Danny Phantom. Do they end up together? And then there are some where you're just like, oh, this is spicy. But usually for me, if it's Danny Phantom and it's spicy, they have to be adult aged. Yeah. I can't stand it when they're like teenagers having sex. I'm like, no, please don't.
I don't need to witness this.
No. Norris, buddy, you gonna go lay down? We have the dog begging for some reason.
Hi. You need to lie down,
No, he just wanting attention. So let's see here. Which platform do you read on? Because I know we talked about fanfic and archive.
For the longest time, I refused to move off of fanfiction.net because it was what I was used to.
Yeah.
But then they did the purge where they got rid of a bunch of adult stories.
Yeah.
And it seemed that the platform just sort of fizzled out overnight.
It's dying.
Yeah, there's no support from the staff. And the only thing that's really great about fanfiction.net that I wish that they would do for AO3 is that fanfiction.net has a personal messaging system.
Yeah.
And Archive of Our Own doesn't have that.
Wait, I thought Archive did.
Not that I've seen.
I'll have to look again. But no, yeah, I agree. Like having that kind of personal like back and forth, especially if you end up writing a story and you want someone to beta and they're on the same platform so you can communicate with each other.
Right.
Or if a fan finds something and instead of like posting it on the reviews, they can be like, hey, I noticed this thing.
Exactly.
Or if they have questions.
Right. Some people are shy. They don't like to comment publicly. Or, some people don't want to embarrass an author if they find a mistake. They don't want to call them out publicly on that. It's nice to have the option to contact the author privately to tell them something that you wouldn't otherwise be comfortable posting publicly.
Yeah.
But at the same time, Archive of Our Own has a really nice dark mode for one.
Yes, I love the dark mode.
I haven't seen a fan fiction of Our Own dark mode, but it could just be me not knowing how to use the site.
Fanfic.net does have a dark mode.
Oh, it does.
But it's getting harder and harder to find the button for it. Well, it's so annoying.
I'm bad with technology as it is, so hard to find buttons are bad for me.
Oh, no. Do you remember? I think everyone who reads fanfic can agree in terms of like platform of which one to read it. That you have fanfic.net, which is starting to fade, but you got Archive of Our Own, but fuck Wattpad.
I've never been on Wattpad. Never. It intimidated the hell out of me because I logged onto it and I could not figure out how to sort anything.
That was my problem. I was literally in the problem is like if you do find something, the filter system is terrible. Because I ended up, again, I looked on Wattpad because I was like, let me find maybe this very specific genre of story. And of course, there was fanfic.net, Archive of Our Own, and there was Wattpad. So I looked at Wattpad because I've exhausted all researches on fanfic, and I didn't want to, at the time, touch Archive. And I got on Wattpad, and I was like, what the hell am I looking at? And I found one story once I figured out, like, the front page. I found one story. I'm like, okay, clicked on it, couldn't figure out how to get to the story. And I was like, how am I supposed to read this? And then one story I did manage to read, like, I read, like, 2 chapters into it, and I went, I can't do this. Because it was either the way it was written or the format it was in on that website, and I couldn't do it. It was just, So, yeah. Fanfics are weird.
They are weird. But one thing that's really great about Archive of Our Own that is not on fanfiction.net is that they allow you to create tags if you want to write about something that isn't in the system. You don't have to contact the staff in order to create a tag for you and then wait for them to get around to it before you can post your story. And also, if your fanfiction happens to feature more than just, I think it's 4 characters that fanfiction.net lets you have, you can actually tag them so people can find those characters that you've taken the time to write about.
Yeah. The problem, I like that feature, but again, it's when the people who decided to add in every single
Every character who's ever breathed in the vicinity of the story.
That or make some other words up or make like random tags. And I'm like, can you stick to what you've written, please?
The people who have like whole conversations in the place where they're supposed to put like the genre and stuff like that. I gotcha.
I'm just like, okay. That's when those get too much that I'm like, scroll. Okay, where's the summary? But no, what was it? I'm trying to think what else for like fanfic stuff. I said at the beginning, like, most people, especially like when like fandom communities, whether it's like turning a show into a fandom or turning a movie or whatever, that it's a lot of people will cringe. And if you're an avid reader or even a writer, you kind of have a tendency to be like, don't look. Or if someone says fanfic, they're like, fanfic, you read that? Because like there's some people that are like, oh, you should just read a book then. And you're like, I do, but I finished those.
Right. There's this mentality that fan fiction is somehow lesser than other literature just because it takes place in a pre-established world.
Yeah.
But it's really not. Some of the fan fictions that I've read have been just gorgeous. Like, there are very good writers in fan fiction. It's just, it takes a lot of time and energy and emotional investment to get into a new book, a new story, new characters. Some people just don't have that to spare, but they still want to create. They want to create within a universe that they've come to love with characters that they identify with. So they create something that they then share for free.
Yeah.
We
ain't getting paid for this.
Exactly. Like, I don't understand where the vitriol for fan fiction comes from. It's, creating something from something that you and others already love so that there is now more content for the thing that you love in the world and it's being shared for free. Like,
I get where the cringe stuff comes from. It's when you get the ones that like you read them. Mind you, they're always usually pretty old ones too. But you read them and you look at this and go, that 12-year-old wrote this. I know a 12-year-old wrote this. And those are the ones that you're like, Also, like, if you read the smutty or lemon, as they used to be called, the smutty one.
We're old people.
We're veterans. But you read the spicy one, and either you can tell the female wrote it, a man wrote it, or a child who's never had sex wrote it. And you're like, I know who did this. But what about one of the genres? It's kind of a genre. But you were talking about, like, you bought all these people that are, like, creative content and, like, they put in all this stuff for free. The authors that write crossovers.
Okay.
I tip my hat to them. Because there are some that are, like, really, really good. And then there are some that are absolute shit. With every story. There's going to be those ones where you're like, this is garbage. I don't like this. Or this is really good. Like this. Crossovers, I feel like you have to have a special mindset of how to write these.
Right.
And I've tried. And I don't have that mindset as much as I want to.
Really? I thought your crossover was really good.
Mike pointed out something to me about my fanfic that was a Danny Phantom Teen Wolf crossover, and he asked me, he goes, which crossover is it? And I said, what do you mean? He goes, which crossover is it? I said, it's a Danny Phantom Teen Wolf. He goes, no. Is it Danny Phantom in Teen Wolf, or is it Teen Wolf in Danny Phantom? And I was just like, mind blown.
Well, which is it?
I don't know.
You haven't figured that out yet?
No.
Well, I don't think that's always a necessity either. You can have, you can create a middle ground without it having to be, these people have been transported. And I think that's called isekai. Is that what it's called?
Well, yeah, the ones that I like they're not necessarily transported. They're more like, they're part of the same universe. Like, the best one I've ever read was, there's a few, there's a lot of ones I've read. There's one that I've read that it takes a early 90s show called The Sentinel and mixes it with Yu-Gi-Oh.
Okay.
Yu-Gi-Oh. You have Yu-Gi-Oh. If anyone's ever watched like the OC Yu-Gi-Oh with like Yugi and Joey and all those people, it's very cartoony, very like heart of the cards, friendship, magic thing. So and then the Sentinel is like buddy cop with a little bit of mysticism mixed in there, but they don't really explain it very well, but it's there. So this fanfic took the cartooniness of the Yu-Gi-Oh! And dumbed it down and made it more human, more realistic, and then put it into the Sentinel world. And it worked out so well, and it was really beautifully written. The characters were well done, and I was just like, I love this. It works.
See, and that's so that is taking Yu-Gi-Oh! And changing it to fit into the universe of Sentinel. Okay, but there are some things where you actually have both universes. You don't have to just pick one.
Right.
Like there's one that I've been reading recently that I've been enjoying a lot that takes the mythology from The Witcher, takes the mythology from Dragon Age, looks at the things that have overlap, and goes, well, what if they were the same mythology, but something just separated them over time? And so it takes characters from The Witcher, where the mythology has evolved in one way, and it takes them over to Dragon Age to see how it evolved the other way because of this divide in the fabric of reality.
Which makes sense, because like The Witcher story, if I remember correctly, like the far back history is that the humans just randomly showed up in this world.
Right, exactly. The conjunction of the spheres where, you know, the worlds collided like a bunch of volleyballs, and then, you know, everybody came spilling through, and then everything changed from there. So it makes sense in that way. This is called The Herald of Time and Space by Poetic Cat. Nice. So just in case. So I think it's interesting when people can look at two different properties and go, you know what? These things are similar in such a sense that I don't really have to change that much for them to work together. Like you've taken two fandoms that have sort of a
similar vibe?
I want to say sort of a Halloweenish sort of vibe.
Yeah.
Yeah. Teen Wolf with the werewolf mysticism and the ghost mysticism of Danny Phantom.
Yes.
They both take place in a high school. So technically, why couldn't they be in the same universe?
That's what I usually try and play it off as. Like the first one I wrote, because I wrote two different ones. Like the first one, Danny is about 16. He's run away and ends up in the town that Teen Wolf is set in. And then the second one I wrote, which I never published because it got to a certain point where I was like, I don't know where I'm going with this. It was like older Danny and Sam, because like if you do the math, if you go deep diving into this, the characters of Danny and Sam, like the kids, would be our age now.
Okay.
So I'm just like, yeah,
the deep lore.
they're in their 30s. So I played it off that like you got older Sam and Danny, and they're traveling across country because they went to go to like California, and then they're gonna travel back home, and they end up in this town because their car broke down, and then they meet like the kids, and like some weird stuff was going to happen, and again I got to a point where I was like, I don't know how to get this to work, and I ended up stopping.
I mean, sometimes stories just, you don't find the perfect way for them to end.
No.
Like, do you prefer to have a story that ends disappointingly or a story that stops?
Well, there are ones that, like, I really wish they didn't stop. I don't want the ones that disappoint me, because I can't stand those, even in movies or TV shows, because I literally will sit there and go, but what happened? And Mike goes, that's the end. I'm like, no. No, I don't like this. What happened? So I can't. Yeah, I can see that. So I've admitted that I've written some stuff. I used to. I can't do episodic long chapters, I realized. And I've done a few one-shots here and there. I have a few that are successful in terms of like people liked them. I mean, I'm not going to sit there and be like, I'm a very popular author. No, by all means, I'm not. But I've had like people that are like, oh, I really like this. I thought I like this concept. Have you written anything?
Nothing successful.
Like, well, again, mine aren't successful. Like, the most I can say is I have 20 reviews.
See, and that's really cool. I think it's better to have a few people who really enjoy your work than a lot of people who just insist that you continue it.
I had one person for a story I wrote, and then I stopped it, and then I put it on hiatus, and then I eventually went back and went, yeah, no, I'm never finishing this. And the person was like, why? And I'm like, I lost interest in this. I'm sorry.
See, but isn't that nice to know that there's still someone after all this time who really loved your story enough to want to see it continue, even though you hadn't updated it in quite some time?
Yes, which brings me to the one, I'm not guilty of this, but have you come across a fanfic that like you didn't look at when it was updated last, you didn't look like when it was published, but you read the concept and you're like, I like this, and you just went click, read, and you're reading it, it's got a lot of chapters, and you're reading it, and then it stops. And you're like, I wonder when the next one comes out. And you look at the update. It hasn't been
like
updated
4 years.
4 years plus. I get so many of those, and I'm just like, why did I read this? I'm so unsatisfied now. Because because I'll never know what happens.
Mm-hmm.
And people are like, oh, let's leave it up to your imagination. And I'm like, no, I want to know what the author was going to go with this. Like, there was one, and at least they admitted it. There was a Danny Phantom, My Hero Academia crossover. And it was basically because Danny Phantom, like, if you go into the ghost realm, there's different doors that can lead to different places. So they're playing it off as, a portal opened between the ghost zone and universe of My Hero, and Danny got yeeted into it because something was happening. I don't remember what. And then so he gets stuck there because it was a natural portal. And then shenanigans ensue, and he ends up getting caught. And it got to a certain point where, like, shit was getting good. And then the author goes, this is permanently discontinued. And I was like, no! But they put out there, they're like, had I continued this, these are some of the bullet points that I would have gone with. And I was like, oh, at least you put that out there to kind of give us an idea. Because a lot of authors, not a lot, but a few of them will go, hey, if anybody wants to pick this up or adopt this fanfic, you can have it. Those I find interesting, but I'm still disappointed.
Would you ever consider adopting a fan fiction that you really liked that was discontinued?
I almost considered it one time, but I feel like I wasn't going to do it justice, so I never did.
Okay, that's fair.
But I have a love-hate relationship with fanfics. Because then I'm like, I should read books. Then, like you said, it's hard to go out and find a new book because you're like, I don't know about this.
Exactly. Everybody's tastes are subjective, and you can't exactly look at, you liked this book, so you'll definitely like this other book. And you're like, that's a lot of reading to know if I like this other book.
Like, I appreciate the recommendations. Like, if you read stuff online, like if you do ebooks, and they'll be like, after you finish the book, and they're like, what about this one? Like, if there's no other sequel, excuse me, to the current book you're reading. And they go, you might enjoy these. And I'm like, let me read the synopsis. And that's, again, the whole, like, do I like this? No, yes, no, yes. I feel like I'm very picky, and I know what I like, but nothing I feel will itch that good read itch that, like, sometimes fanfics and, like, good books will itch.
Right, exactly. Like I said, it's harder to get into a brand new universe. Even if it sounds promising, you open the first page and it's like, welcome, here's all the lore you need to learn before you can understand where you're going in this.
So Lord of the Rings.
16 pages describing how Frodo's parents drowned it in the lake.
Or
and
why
yes,
the trees
they said drowned it in the Lord of the Rings. That is not a grammatical error.
Hey. Hi, Mike. But no, yeah, for me, it's like, there's, I don't know. What about, have you read any fanfics that are within your fandom that tie in with historical, like they're semi-historical, like they make it seem like, oh, this happened?
Not really. No. Which, no.
I can't say I have either. I read one, it was a Doctor Who Star Trek crossover. Which that was interesting. It wasn't the greatest, but it was better than most of the other ones I'd read.
Well, Doctor Who takes place during our current day, right?
Sort of. It depends on which doctor you go to.
I'm not familiar with Doctor Who, I admit, but I thought that they had events that tied into actual history. Like, I know that there's one where they go and find Van Gogh.
Yes, and I love that episode. But yeah, there's some in the series itself, like the actual show, there are parts that go historical, and then there's some that kind of just other world. Because, space and time.
Okay.
But this one for fanfic was it mixed with Star Trek Next Generation, which there's an official crossover of that, and it's great, and it's 2 comic books long, and I absolutely love it. But anyway, story. It went to, like, one historical thing that happened, because the doctor was like, I need to go do this one thing here, and he ended up bringing, like, a member or 2 from the TCG group, and it got to a certain point where it was just like, no, I can't do this. Ooh, which reminds me, what about episodic fanfics? Like ones that are like 200 plus chapters.
I love long fan fictions because it gives me something to listen to on long road trips. It gives me something that I can get really invested in. Like the author clearly put a lot of time and energy and thought into this. They really wanted to tell a big, epic story. And it's like, wow, you really love the story that you're telling. I'm going to check it out. As opposed to like, I'm not saying that smaller stories are not loved, but there are like challenges that are, kick this out in a day. And those are cool. Those are really neat. I'd like to do more of those myself, but it doesn't have the same sort of like, I poured sweat, blood, and tears into this 500,000 word epic,
What about the ones like they start off strong, like they're episodic fanfics? Like they start off strong, and then at some point you get lost, and you're like, "Why am I even reading this anymore?"
Yeah, that happens sometimes. Authors will sometimes think that the longer that they make it, that as long as it keeps going, people will keep enjoying it. That's not always the case.
No, I again sticking with Danny Phantom because that's like the one that I usually that's my go-to. I found one. And I don't want to name it because I don't want to diss the author because like it has some really good concepts and it was really interesting, but it somewhere it went, what the hell is happening?
Right.
It was just too much. And it got to like 200, it's currently like 200 something chapters. And it starts off where like some shit happens and then they end up in the ghost zone somehow. And then it follows like ghost culture and ghost law that the humans don't realize is a thing because their perception is that, oh, ghosts are just monsters. And it was interesting. I was like, oh, that's an interesting concept. I like that. And then it just keeps going off. And then it goes on to this episodic, like, thing. And then another thing happens. And then all of a sudden, it's like, what is going on? So I stopped reading it. And I still get updates for it because I had it on my, like, notify me when it updates. And I still get it. And I keep forgetting to unfavorite it.
Right. If you're going to have a story, regardless of how long it is, if it's a short story or a long story, you should have a solid plot in mind. You want to get from point A to point B, and here's all the things that need to happen in order to get to a satisfying ending at point B.
Yes.
If you start branching off into point C, point D, point E, all these kinds of things, then you should just create different, like, short stories that are within the same universe, maybe. Yeah. You want to create, like, a what-if series, like Marvel has done.
Yeah. There was one... there was a person, I don't know if they're the same person, that's on Tumblr and is on Archive, or it's the person saw the art that the person on Tumblr made and made their own stuff on Archive. But they're tied together because it's kind of based off of what the person drew. And it's like these, it's a Danny Phantom Marvel crossover type thing, but it's like Danny Phantom, Deadpool, and Spider-Man, like older Spider-Man, not like young Spider-Man. So they meet up because Danny ends up going to New York. And the comic books are really funny and just kind of really playful because they play off on the like whole Danny kind of mischievous ghost type thing, but also like, superhero trying to do his thing. And the fanfics dive in a little bit more, but kind of follow along with the comics and then make their own thing. And each story that they put out is a part of a series, but it's just one chapter each.
That makes sense. The cool thing about Danny Phantom specifically that can't be said about a lot of other sort of stories is that his particular sort of power, his backstory sort of thing is something that can be adapted to so many different stories. Yes. Do you enjoy more when somebody takes the concept of Danny's like ghost form, ghost powers, all that kind of stuff, and adapts it to be like, yes, this could be a quirk. Yeah, this could be a mutant power. Like turns him into something that is an adaptation of his power in another universe? Or do you prefer when he has the original iteration of his powers in his own universe?
I like the idea that he has his own powers in his own universe. Like the way he got them was so abnormal, so strange that it's unheard of. Kind of like the Hulk type thing, like gamma radiation, lab accident. That's what happened to the Hulk. You got Danny, lab accident in the ghost portal. How he got his powers. But to help with the crossover stories of like say DC or Marvel or My Hero, he can't fully explain to these people like this is what happened, that or he either doesn't trust to tell them like how it happened, doesn't want to correct them, or he's just like, no, yeah, sure, this is what it is. So he's like, yeah, sure, stick with whatever you want. Because there's a really funny one and it's from DC. It was John Constantine. And if you know John Constantine, he deals with like dark arts and like demons and ghosts and stuff like that. So there's like a few that are crossed over that are well written, and there's one that's absolutely hilarious where John is with the League, they're up in the tower and they're having a meeting, and Batman's like, yeah, there's this kid superhero in this town that we've never really heard about until now, and we're thinking of going and investigating, and John's like, don't fuck with him, don't go to that town, don't mess with him, don't talk to him, don't do anything. And they're all like, why? And he's like, that is an Eldritch Lich style ghost, don't fuck with it. Even though Danny is just like, hi. Like he's that type of kid, he's not gonna sit there, I will wreck you. But Constantine is just like, don't fuck with it. Just leave it alone. Let it stay in its bubble. Let it contain what's there. Let it contain what's there. don't mess with it. And I like that idea of John just going, why the fuck are you messing with this? To the rest of the league.
Right.
But then, like, you got Danny over here just like, what? Because he doesn't know that, like, he has that power level. But because he's just like, I'm here fighting ghosts. And that reminds me, that's another part that I feel like for Danny, and for, like, I think a lot of other characters, too, that have, like, superpowers or something happens. Do you feel like with Dragon Age and, what was the other one?
Mass Effect?
Mass Effect. That they have powers or specific abilities that are almost OP or overpowered, but they work in that universe. But if you were to put them in somewhere else, it's almost, they're incredibly strong, and they seem to just be like, well, what's the use of these other characters?
Mages, for sure, in Dragon Age can be incredibly strong with little to no drawback that I'm aware of. So mages from Dragon Age put into a different universe would be like, oh no, oh no. Like, but in Mass Effect, the really cool thing that I love about the characters in that particular fandom in that game is that they're all just people, you know? They're all just people with guns fighting a war. They don't have any, I mean, the Biotics have their own specific set of powers, and Liara could wreck shit in another universe, I'm sure. But for the most part, Shepard, Garrus, Rex, any of the non-biotic crew members are just people. And I think that's really cool. And I've seen a lot of well, not a lot, but I've seen some crossovers where people will take them and just put them into another universe in a different time frame, and they're just people in that time frame too. I think humanizing characters is really interesting. Like, would you ever read a fanfic about Danny Phantom losing his powers? Would that be of any interest to you?
If it's done well, and if it's a way where they're like, he either comes to terms with how he can't get his powers back, or they end up going on a journey, like adventure, to either reclaim the powers or figure out, like, can I get them back? Do I want them back? Type thing. Because, like, there was an actual episode where Danny, like, it was in Phantom Planet. It was, like, one of the few parts that was like, that's an interesting concept, where he purposely took his own powers away because he felt like he was of no use because of some stuff that was happening in town. And it was really interesting. And unfortunately, because of how the episode played out, they never got too deep into it. And then at some point in the episode, he gets his powers back because of some shenanigans.
Okay.
I don't want to go too deep into it in case anyone's not seen it, or everyone knows about it. So, but again, if it's well written, because there's a story, and it's a 2-part story, and they're about, I want to say, 40 to 50 chapters long. They're pretty decent, and it's 2-part. It's Phantom of Truth, and I can't remember the second one. I have to look it up, but Shadow of a Doubt. Phantom of Truth and Shadow of a Doubt. And basically what happens is there's a government agency in Danny Phantom series called the Guys in White, who are their government agency, kind of play off Men in Black, but they're a government agency, and they've captured Phantom. So their basically job is to capture ghosts, but they're terrible at it. Like in the show, they're terrible. But in this one, they finally capture Phantom, and they hire Danny's mom to be, because she, like, her and Jack were like the lead ghost scientists, but they hire her because she's actual doctorate. Come in to study him, whether it's dissecting or cutting or talking or whatever. So basically the entire time she is cut off from the outside world because they're like super restrictive. You can't do this. You can't use your cell phone. You can't talk to anybody until your contract is up. And the entire time she's torturing Phantom to either get some type of truth out of him or make him do certain things, taking samples from him. And at one point she ends up like cutting off his hand and like dissecting the hand, and he can still feel it. And the entire time she doesn't realize this is her son. And that's
dark.
Yeah. And he's too afraid to tell her because he's like, I don't want to do this to her. She doesn't need to find out this way.
Right.
And like there's a part where like he accidentally calls her mom because like he's kind of like half delirium. And she freaks out and does, you don't dare speak those words to me, and like super electrocutes him to the point where like he almost like de-transforms, but he stops it. But because he stopped it, he's almost like what she thought was destabilizing. Long story short, she ends up getting more sympathetic because she realizes that, he acts like a kid. He acts too much like a kid. What am I doing? Like she kind of, the moral side kicks in for her, and she helps him escape. And like he ends up retaching his hand because ghost, go back. And she ends up helping him escape because she's like, if he stays here, he's going to destabilize and he's just going to disappear. And then that's where the second story, I think Shadow of a Doubt, comes in, where like Danny, because she gets home in the first story, she gets home and they're all like, Danny's been missing for like this long. And then so they worry. And then all of a sudden Danny just magically shows up, but he's like emaciated and like looks absolutely terrible.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really interesting because the first story, oh my god, not Shadow of a Doubt.
Phantom of Truth?
Yes, Phantom of Truth. Sorry, I get them mixed up sometimes.
It's totally fine.
But the end of it, they had 2 chapters.
Mm-hmm.
Or 2 endings to the story.
Mm-hmm.
The first ending was they played it off as if he died. Like, he comes home, they discover him, but he dies.
Mm-hmm.
And then the second one is he comes home, they discover him, and they take him straight to the hospital. It's
Mm-hmm.
like, he's not okay.
Mm-hmm.
And then that's when the second story picks up, where he's in the hospital. He's kind of coming, he keeps telling, like, all his friends and, like, his sister who know who he is. Like, they keep trying to ask him, like, what happened to you? Where'd you go? Why are you like this?
Mm-hmm.
And then at the same time, the doctors are, like, asking him, and the media is like, where'd you go? How'd you through? And he's making up some story, like, oh, I got kidnapped or something happened, and I walked all the way back here.
Mm-hmm.
And so he's not telling, like, the full story. But then eventually his friends and his sister find out, and because they realize, oh, it's his mom,
Mm-hmm.
at one point, Sam punches her, which is great because you're just like, yes, bitch.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, because, like, Maddie doesn't fully understand. But eventually, throughout the entire thing, Danny runs away because he's like, I'm putting people in danger, putting myself in danger, and I can't handle this. I can't be around my mom. I can't do this. So he runs. And he ends up in a town where it's like this hobo dinky little town that has like a well-run medical clinic that they let him come in because he's still suffering the side effects of being locked up for so long in the GIW thing.
Mm-hmm.
And basically the entire story is him getting over his PTSD, learning to deal with his powers, which are actually on the fritz. So he does lose his powers, sort of.
Mm-hmm.
And then eventually at the end, like, Maddie realizes, oh shit, that was my son.
Mm-hmm.
So you deal with her dealing with that morality and, like, the oh shit parent factor. So those are one of the ones that I'm just like, yes, give me more. Give me more. Give me angst. Give me drama. Give me...
Oh, angst is always fun. Hurt, comfort, angst, womp, all that good stuff.
Oh my god, I love it to a certain extent. Like, I like it, and people are like, are you sadistic? I'm like, no, I just like, character
a little
development.
bit sadistic.
A little bit. But I feel like if you put character development along with, like, this hurt, comfort stuff, it's good. But if it's just, let me, like, stab this character over and over, that's,
Right. Hurt with no comfort is no fun.
No.
Angst is fun because it's generally resolved at some point.
Yes.
Yeah. That's good.
Sorry. I realize I get, like, fully in depth into, like, trying to describe a story without trying to describe it because I don't want to spoil it.
No, absolutely. It's a lot of fun. It's a really cool thing that you have so much passion for these stories that you read that aren't even your own stories.
No.
It's someone else's creation that you've found that you love enough that you're, now gushing about it. I think it's really cool.
Would you think, have you found, okay, let me see if I can word describe it. Have you read a fanfic that was super cool and you read it through all the way and you've even gone back to read it, and then you find that people are making fan art for it?
I don't think I have. I don't think I've seen any. I read very seldomly these days, unfortunately, because I just don't have a lot of time.
That's fair.
And there's a lot that goes into finding, the perfect fan fiction that I want to sit down and read. I've read some fan fictions where I'm like, this is really good. I've made art for fan fictions that I thought were really good because I'm like, this deserves to have art. But I don't think I've ever recently come across any fan fiction that has its own artwork that led me to it or that someone else had done beforehand. That's a huge compliment when somebody gives your fan work art.
Yes.
Because you're doing the story for free. You don't expect anything in return. And then somebody says, oh, well, I appreciate your time enough to give you my time in return.
Yeah.
That's super cool. Have you ever had someone do fan art for any of your fan fiction?
No.
Have you done fan art for your fan fiction?
Yes.
Well, that's also really, really cool.
I did it, but I made them look more like, might call them my CD covers. Because they were supposed to be like chapter covers, if you will. Like, here's an image that, like, pairs off with chapter. And that was all it was. It wasn't like anything super detailed. It was just kind of like that mysterious, like, typical, like, cover for a book type kind of look to them.
Yeah, that's really cool, though.
So that was it. And then I've based a one shot or two off of a picture somebody drew. Like, they didn't make a fanfic or anything. It's just a picture they drew based on that fandom. And I was like, I like that. I'm going to make a one shot based off of that.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
Now, do you think that that's something that artists like as much as... Do you think that artists enjoy getting fic made of their artwork as much as fic writers enjoy getting art made of their fic?
I think it's 50-50. Because usually when I find something like that and I'm inspired enough that I want to write something about it, I go to the creator of the artwork and go, do you mind if I do this?
Right.
And a lot of times they're like, yeah, cool, thank you. And then once I'm done, I send them the link to the full like posting. I'm like, here you go. And then they'll post up like, so-and-so wrote the story for the picture. And that's really cool to see because then they bring in like draws that way. And I'm like, yes, read. But at the same time, I'm just like, if nobody reads it, I'm okay. I got this off my head because it...
Right.
I don't know about you, but I hyperfixate sometimes when it comes to that.
Oh, I absolutely hyperfixate.
I'm just like, yes. And then I realize, ooh, I should look at something else.
You know what? If something makes you happy, what's the problem with indulging in it, right? As long as you're not hurting anybody, what's the issue?
Burnout?
Yeah.
Because you get to a point where like you look into it, and you're just finding things, same thing over and over, and you're just like, I need to step back.
Yeah.
I need to step back because like, I get impatient and I'm like, why aren't they updating? Why isn't this being updated? Why isn't this been written? And then the idea of, well, if you're not finding it, why don't you just write it yourself?
Right.
And then it gets to the point where like, yeah, but it's not going to be the same.
Right.
I want someone else to write it so I can read it.
Right. So, let me see if there's a way to word this. Is there anything in particular that you have been looking for right now that you wish that you could find? Like, you don't have to be specific, but you can say, yeah, there's a few things in particular that I've been trying to find recently that I've found or I just couldn't find, and I don't want to write it myself because I don't want to spoil myself.
Somebody recently that was really cool. It's like people will go on, mostly at Tumblr, but they'll go on there and they'll do, here's prompts for a story. They won't necessarily write it, but they'll do a prompt and they'll say like, hey, here's this thing. Like, here's the basic idea of this whole idea story you could do. And somebody put out one and I read it and I was just like, I really like this. And of course, it was one of the things that I'm like, can you actually turn this into a story? And part of me is like, you should write it. And I'm like, no. Again, I want someone else to write it so I can read it.
I want to be able to enjoy it for the first time.
Yes. I don't want to go through the stress of writing it and making sure the grammar's correct, making sure the characters are, in character. And it's just...
Have you ever contributed a plot bunny to one of those sort of collections?
I did recently. I wouldn't say that it was a plot bunny, but it was more like a, hey, why hasn't this been a thing type thing? And again, Danny Phantom, because that's my fixation. I put out on Tumblr like kind of like a semi-rant of why isn't there any Ghostbuster Danny Phantom crossovers?
You've got to be kidding me. That seems like
none. And if there is one, it's absolutely terrible. And I put out there, I said, I realized that Ghostbusters is super old compared to Danny Phantom. You got Ghostbusters, which is like if you think about the movie and everything, it's late 1990s or 1980s.
1980s, yeah.
Yeah. But then you have like the two newer stuff that's coming out. So I said, if you want to go with the original movies and or like the early cartoon that they came out with, it can be that Danny's parents went to college with one of the other guys from the Ghostbusting team, or they're like colleagues at some point. Oh no, something's in my eye.
Oh no.
But anyway, they're colleagues of some sort, or they're on opposite ends of the ectoscience spectrum, and they don't necessarily agree with each other on how they perform, ghost hunts and stuff. And something happens, and they end up either going to New York or going to Amity Park, and they somehow coincide and shenanigans happen. Whether they be super dramatic or super angsty or whatever, but shenanigans happen. Or you can flip it that you have the newer stuff, like the all-female character group, where it's a similar thing to the other one, where it's like they go there, they meet up, something happens, or Danny helps them, something. Or you have the new movie that's going to be coming out, which I'm calling like the Next Generation, because it's Ego's granddaughter. I think that's what the whole thing is.
Does it have Paul Rudd in it? Is that the one you're talking about?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So, but like you have an older Danny possibly, and he goes to help them, or keep it the same age as the show, and he goes and helps them, or they meet up somewhere, something like that. And people are like, oh my God, why haven't we seen this? And I'm like, right?
I think there will be more once that new movie comes out.
It's 50-50 because Danny Phantom, like, it's had a resurgence, but at the same time, it's an old cartoon now. Like, I was watching this in, like, middle school.
Okay.
Like, late middle school, early high school. That's when I was watching it.
Do you have any idea why it's had a recent resurgence?
Because of, like, the headcanons that people can come with and make this, like, super kiddie show, making it a little bit more realistic, making it a little darker, and the fun and the pictures that people come out of it. Also, there's just memes that come out of it. Like during May, it's called Danny Apocalypse. Apparently, I think it's in May or April. It's Danny Apocalypse, and it's basically solely off of a screen cap from an episode where the episode is like he's running down the hall, and like the animation, like he does this weird like turn to go move down the hall because the perspective changes. That's in the original cartoon. But somebody freeze framed it right at the perfect moment where like Danny's running, so his body is parallel like this, and in the show he turns his head and the body follows. The screen cap is literally him running, and then his head is just this way, and it's like this weird blank look, and it's rather creepy to the point now where they just use that as a meme.
Oh, okay.
It's ridiculous.
I feel like I'd have to see it to fully understand
you want to see this cursed image?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Show me the cursed image.
I will show you this cursed image, but as I'm doing this, have you found any fan art that has led you to a fan fiction?
Not that has led me to a fan fiction. That has led me to want to write a fan fiction. Yes, I found some that was very, well, it's always the art that hits you right in the heart, you know, that makes you want to write the fan fiction.
Yes.
But I haven't really found any artwork that led me to an already written fan fiction, which is unfortunate because I feel like, you know, that's a really good way to find stuff that sparks the imagination, is if it has already sparked someone else's imagination.
Oh, yeah. God, what? I need to find this. I'm going to be so mad if I can't find this. Well, have any of your fanfics ever taken just a random side character from either series and made a fanfic evolving around that side character? Because that's happened a lot in the Danny Phantom series, and it's funny, but at the same time, can't find the image now, but at the same time, it's weird. I'm not weird. Weird's not the right word. I'm not as interested as other people would be.
You you think that the side characters don't need further development?
Not necessarily. It's just me personally. I'm just not interested in that. Like that's not my field. That's not my forte. I don't care about that.
Okay.
But for Danny Phantom, like the best, I find it entertaining. Like the side story that side character that everyone likes to hone in on is this random red-headed basketball player that shows up in the background of certain episodes while they're in the high school because he's another student. And so they have dubbed him as Wes. And the entire thing of Wes is he's in the photography group or photography class in the art department, but he's also like one of the but he's a basketball player for the basketball team in the high school. And he saw Danny change into Phantom. And he's trying to convince everybody else that Fenton is Phantom and Phantom is Fenton. And he's trying to convince everyone that they're the same person. Nobody will believe him. And then it gets to the point where Danny just starts messing with him. And so and so everyone in the school just thinks Wes has like conspiracy theories. So that's that side character.
That's really cute though. It's sort of what's the name of that pony that had the eyes that were pointing in two different directions? Derpy Hooves effect.
I would know this. I impressed my niece with my Little Pony knowledge. She had her third or fourth birthday and it was My Pony themed. And I was like, you got Rainbow Dash and you got Twilight? And she's just like, yeah.
Oh, that's so cute.
Yes, and I've written a fanfic for My Little Pony.
Oh, really?
It was a one-shot, and it was based off of an art that somebody else drew.
Okay.
But otherwise...
Well, there you go. More fan fiction that springs from artwork. That's very cool.
Because it was really cute, and I was just like, I like this concept. I'm going to stick with this. Sorry.
That's okay.
My slurp. But no, yeah, I'm trying to think what else. Have you run across a fanfic that halfway through you either lose interest or it just starts getting cringy?
I don't think so. I've been pretty lucky with the fan fictions that I've read. Most of them either just drop off or they seem to be pretty consistent throughout as much as I end up reading of them. It's hard to find really, really, really good fan fiction. There's just such an abundance of it, and so little of it is like the quality to which we prefer to read, which is good. It's good that people are, because the only way to get better at writing is to write. So, going back to the idea of the 12-year-olds who have written the super cringy fan fictions, like, yeah, those could be bad, but maybe if they keep writing badly, then they'll start to write well.
Right. And that's where I'll sit there and look at something and I go, this is absolute garbage. I hate it. This is terrible. I know a 12-year-old wrote this. But at the same time, I'm not going to sit there and and these are where I hate some people. They'll go on and they'll be like, your stuff is shit. You're terrible. You should stop writing. No, I'm not going to go on and tell them that. I'm literally going to go, no, and just move on to the next thing.
Exactly. If you've got nothing constructive to say,
Don't
it's
say
not
anything.
worth saying anything. That's another differentiation between the culture of fanfiction.net and the culture of AO3 is that fanfiction.net has a
They
lot
are mean.
Yes, they're mean.
So mean. The only time I'm ever mean on a fanfic is if I'm sitting there when's the next chapter? but fanfic, I noticed recently one of the things they did to try and combat spam reviews or spam notifications like that is if you've already reviewed on that chapter, you can't review again.
Oh, really?
Yes. So unless you want to just spam the author's DM, you can't put something publicly mean anymore. Leave it at the first thing.
Huh. I had no idea that was a thing that they'd done.
Because I recently discovered that because I went back and I reread a story, and I guess when I read it the first or second time or however many times I read it, I left a comment or left a review, and I went and read it again and went to write another review, and it gave me the error message of you've already done this, you can't do it again. So that's when I discovered that. I was like, oh, okay.
Weird.
Ooh, I got another good one. How late, and this can be for any book too.
Okay.
How late have you stayed up reading?
Oh, that's not fair. 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning, sometimes 6 o'clock in the morning if it's really good. And sometimes, I'll stay up that late just writing because sometimes you get caught up writing.
Oh, yeah.
Fan fiction will steal your time, people.
Yes, it will. I mean, even good books will steal your time. I remember when Harry Potter was first coming out, and that was middle school. It was 7th, 8th grade for me when it first started coming out. No, 6th grade. 6th grade when the first one came out. I remember that. I'm old. But no, I remember finally getting the books and staying up so late reading them to the point where I was just I need to go to bed. I'm not going to survive tomorrow. And then it got to the point where I'd fall asleep listening to the audiobooks that I checked out from the library.
Love audiobooks.
Mind you, this is after I've read the actual story, then I listened to the audiobooks, and I'm if I missed some of it because I fell asleep, I'm okay. But then I figured out how to program my radio so the tape would stop at a certain point. So I was yes, I have figured out this technology.
That's always really good.
And then for fanfic, the one I talked about earlier, the first one, I stayed up till about 1:30 reading that, and then I was just I have stuff to do tomorrow. I need to go to bed. So it's. Do you ever sit there you've either finished the story super late at night, or the chapter is done for a while and they're not going to be updating for a little bit. It's still continuing, but they just haven't updated. Do you find yourself laying in bed or just sitting there and then daydreaming what if what could the next chapter be about or scenarios?
Absolutely, yeah. Especially if they've introduced some really interesting concepts in this most recent chapter, or if they leave it on a cliffhanger.
Yes.
Some people will throw you for a loop with these really cool concepts they can come up with in fan fiction. It's wow, this is more interesting than the original story that got me in here in the first place.
Yes. I really enjoy it. That's why I kind of enjoy Danny Phantom, because again, you're taking this super cartoony, kind of it's kiddie. It's the same creator that did Fairly Odd Parents. Though nobody likes him anymore.
I have no idea what happened to the Fairly Odd Parents.
Apparently he's transphobic.
Oh.
And and a lot of the fandom for Danny Phantom like to think that Danny is trans, which I have nothing wrong with that.
Okay.
I personally don't canon that for myself, but if other people do, rock on.
Right.
But they have that fandom, and because Butch is the person who created Danny Phantom came out transphobic type thing, they're just fuck you. So they don't like him. They like the other creators that piled in for Danny Phantom, but they don't like him.
I don't
also,
blame
apparently
them.
he's an art thief.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Just a horrible human being, all things considered.
He just has an unfortunate large ego. So this is based off of other people saying things and me just kind of generally watching him going, I don't really care for him, but whatever. So, but I like taking something that people can hate certain aspects about it. Again, they hate Phantom Planet. Everyone usually agrees that Phantom Planet doesn't exist.
Right.
That's one thing we all usually agree about. But then there are others that are I want to take this super goofy thing or this one particular concept that was really good in this one episode, and I'm going to create a story based off of that.
Right. We had something like that in Mass Effect, because I don't know if you were aware of the big scandal that happened. I say scandal. It wasn't a scandal. It was
it in game or
an
was
upset. It was in the game.
Okay.
Like, Mass Effect 3 has been out for
You're fine. These have been
6
out long
years
enough.
at this point. If you haven't played, no, it's been out for, oh my God, no, The Witcher 3 has been out for 6 years. Mass Effect 3 has been out for like 8 years at this point. Oh my God, I'm so old.
We'll throw out a spoiler warning right here now.
Spoiler! If you haven't played the Legendary Edition and this is your first playthrough, I'm going to be spoiling the end of Mass Effect. So,
I don't mind it because I like being spoiled.
Okay, so at the end of Mass Effect 3, after you've gone through all this trouble to gather your forces and get your friends together, and you've had all these people die for the cause and all this kind of good stuff, you get up there into like the final confrontation on the space station, and then you meet, you know, your big bad guy, and you have this whole talk about morality and like what should be done for the good of the people. And then once that's over, it's like, so what are you going to do? Are you going to press the red button, the green button, or the blue button? And it's like, but I just went to my friends are dead. Like,
like there's an existential crisis that's happening behind me and you want me to press a button?
Exactly. It's like, what did I do all of this work for if everything that I did is going to be boiled down to pressing a button? Like, I have to make a decision that throws everything that I've done up to this point out the window. Nothing matters. So the fandom was pissed about that ending, where they're like, this is not an appropriate ending. This is, I mean, your character who you've come to love throughout this entire game dies in like 90% of these endings. Like, you can pick the blue ending, they die 100% of the time. Green ending, they die 100% of the time. Red ending, they die unless you do something very, very specific and get a certain amount of power behind you.
Wow.
So they're like, but I wanted Shepard to live happily ever after. And the game's like, nah. So you have a lot of people in fan fiction who are like, you know what? Not you too.
So yeah, that's exactly what Phantom Planet. They're just like, they'll take concepts from Phantom Planet, but the other ones they'll like retcon. Like, there's only been one like Phantom Planet sort of kind of happened, but it was based off of another huge event that was taking place. Like, that's canon. And then something happened. Danny defeated the big bad. And then because he was so hurt because of the big battle, he, detransforms. And then that's how everyone in the entire world finds out who he is. And then it goes into the concept of human ghost, almost political, like, should we consider them like entities? Should we do this? And it plays off like that.
Danny Phantom Civil War.
Sort of. It's like, I can't describe it. It's called The Shift, and it's really good. And it's very, very slow to update. And I totally understand that, like, some of these authors are probably, like, in college, have jobs, life happens. So I'm not going to sit there and just be like, why aren't you updating? I'm just going to be like, one day. Just go back occasionally.
Eventually.
Check. Is it update? No.
Yeah. I have abandoned fanfiction.
Two fanfics that aren't even Danny Phantom. One's Inuyasha, one's Fullmetal Alchemist, that, like, I remember favoriting them. I don't remember what the story was about. I don't remember what happened in the story because how long it's been since I read them. They stopped at a certain point. Like, the author just stopped because of life or whatever. And all of a sudden now, 2021, they're picking them back up and updating chapters and everything. And I'm going, I've lost complete interest in this. What the heck is happening?
But you see, that's an interesting thing that happened, an interesting phenomenon that happened in 2020 is because everybody was stuck inside. Fan fiction popularity went through the roof. Yes,
I noticed that a lot, especially with Danny Phantom, because a lot of people were like being drawn to it. And then, of course, other fan fictions as well. And I was just like, well, all right. So it was great for, like, I think the pandemic was a good way to give everyone like a break for certain things, at least creatively, maybe. But at the same time, like, there's a whole other snowball of mass issues that was 2020. But anyway, but I did notice that there was like a huge influx, even with art. And I feel like artists managed to. Wait, can I saw a cat at some point. Like, creeper. But at some point, like, you had all this stuff coming in, and artists were kind of booming. I don't know if you had that same effect.
Only to the extent that nobody could go to cons, so people had to buy exclusively online. So that was pretty good.
Yeah, I think that's where it came from. But fanfic-wise, I did notice the influx, and I was very happy with it. So again, it still had that same problem that fanfics always have of, this is garbage, this was too quickly written, that's an interesting concept, but not very well written, or, yes, let me binge this.
Now, One last question. If you had the option of a story that you abandoned and lost interest in a long time ago, starting to update again with regular chapters that you had to follow, or just one last chapter saying, here's everything that I had in mind for this, what would you prefer?
Kind of like that My Hero one that did?
Yeah, kind of.
My problem is the two that started updating, again, they were Inuyasha and Fullmetal Alchemist. I really like those series, and the fanfics that came out of them, their fanfics were hit or miss. Those ones I just kind of like, eh. Because it's been so long since I read them, I've gotten to the point where like I'm not interested in that fandom currently in terms of like I'm willing to go out and randomly read stuff for it. I've ignored them. So I haven't read them. I kind of wish they would have done the way that other crossover I was talking about did, where they're like, here's a full chapter, here's a full page of like all the ideas I had and concepts that would have happened.
Right.
Like, I mean, I am great that they've rediscovered their stories or someone else has taken it up and they're redoing it and everything. But at the same time, I'm just like, I'm not interested in this anymore.
Right.
And I don't know if it's because I've outgrown it or lost interest per se.
Okay, that makes sense.
So, well, yeah. Is Mike creeping? Oh, what? Okay, so I've been commanded. So yeah, so that's fanfics. There's a whole bunch more stuff. If you ever find your own fanfics that you want to read, definitely read them. Just because somebody on the other end of the internet wrote it doesn't make it any less important or less as fun to read as a hardcover published book.
Right. And sometimes, fan fictions can make you fall even more in love with the things that you were already in love with. If somebody takes a really good concept and applies it to a universe that you already love, it could make the experience of loving that universe even better. And don't forget that these people are human beings too. So, if you like a fan fiction, tell the author, because at the end of the day, that's what keeps them going, is knowing that somebody is out there enjoying what they wrote and enjoying what they created. So this is me advocating, comment on more fan fictions, what?
just let them know, give them that little bubble of encouragement and give them that little warm heart feeling of, oh, somebody liked it.
Exactly. You are not annoying fan fiction writers by telling them that you enjoy what they write, believe me.
Unless you spam their DMs, please don't do that.
Unless you're actually being annoying, then that's a problem.
I have one question for you guys while I'm still recording.
What's that?
Fan fictions have been made into published work, and in some cases, movies.
Rarely.
I know that side.
Rarely.
Side note, it's been 8 years since Mass Effect 3 came out in 2012.
8 years.
Like May of 2012. So, one, what do you think about published work that came out of fanfics? And is there any fanfics that you have found throughout your time that you have read, and this is for the both of you, that you would love to see as an actual published work, or like a small short TV show or a movie, something of that nature?
Phantom of Truth and Shadow of the Doubt series, like they actually made like a mini book for them, published it, and then like they sold it, and along with like other little tidbits that the author. The Shadow of the Doubt and the Phantom of Truth series, the author made little mini booklets for the stories each and actually sold them online. They weren't like super expensive or anything like that, and they also did like, hey, they did Kickstarter for it. That's what they did. So if people wanted these books, they can do the Kickstarter, and they did that. The most well-known publicized fanfic is 50 Shades of Grey.
There have been a lot of different fan fictions. By the way, we do not advocate selling your fan fiction on this podcast. Fan fiction should be a free art form, and that is what keeps AO3 afloat.
Yes, if you do a Kickstarter for your thing, go for it, but keep it on separate platforms.
Please don't advertise for that on AO3. Do not get the rest of us in trouble. We're just trying to live our lives. But that being said, I've found that, if people enjoy the published fan fictions where they've filed off the serial numbers and created their own sort of thing, that's fine. But there's a lot of work that I feel should just be kept as fan fiction.
Yes.
Can you not just enjoy something as a fan fiction without having to make it official? Because somehow it feels like it has less merit to it as an unbranded official work.
Yeah.
Like just recently I watched a special about Het ABO, which was it was talking about how different fan fiction writers had filed off the numbers of their different het ABO fanfictions. I am unfamiliar with this trope, this subcategory.
I've never heard about this until now.
Don't look at me. I don't know anything about ABO apart from what I've heard about this. This is not a statement of judgment. I am clueless. I will remain clueless. But that being said, it was just so much drama attached to these people who had taken this fan fiction trope and tried to make their own original thing with it. I just feel like it's too much trouble. Like,
yeah, I appreciate that if they start off writing fanfics and they actually become like an official author with their own original story and everything.
Right.
Great. Because it's a growing process.
Exactly.
And you've learned how to find your style of writing, how to better your grammar and all the other things that come with writing in English. But some fanfics I think just need to stay fanfics.
Exactly.
Like I said, the Shadow of the Doubt one and the other one I told you about, that was like a very select thing and it was like a limited run. And that was it. Because you have... Now, for the other question, like if you want to see it as an episode or part of a game, because yours are games.
Right.
No. I don't want to see it. The original story is what it is. Cool.
Right.
The reason I like reading fanfics and like certain ones too is seeing these headcanons and these ideas that these people come up with for this series and seeing where they go with it.
Right.
I enjoy that.
Yes.
The other question? Yeah, where can you find you, Hannah?
Me?
Yes.
You can find me on Twitter at Hannahmation Art and everywhere else, meaning Facebook and Instagram, at Hannahmation Studios.
Yay.
What about you, Addy? Where can we find you online?
You can find me on Nerd Doom on Twitter and on Facebook. And you can also, if you want my personal stuff, you can find me on Eastnose Den on Twitter. And yeah. But yeah. So thank you for joining us on this episode of Nerd Doom Podcast as we talked about fanfiction. Hannah, thank you so much for coming and talking with me about this.
Thank you so much for having me. This was so much fun.
Yay! And as always, remember to stay nerdy and have a good one.